Hello, and welcome to Collected Creations. In this video, we're going to talk about King Kong, that son of a bitch. He's a monkey. So, I actually kind of accidentally watched all the King Kong films within the past 6 months. I was going to say this year, but I watched 2 of them last year in like December, I think. Because I was going through the Showa era Godzilla films and lead up to Godzilla X Kong. And, you know, I want to watch King Kong vs. Godzilla, the original, but then my brother was like, hey, because he had a night off work, he wanted to lay down and watch a movie. He's like, can we just watch Godzilla vs. Kong instead? Because obviously there's like, 50 years of difference? Maybe 40 years, I won't say 50, but still. Actually, maybe. 60s to 2020, yeah, sure, why not? Definitely 50 years. But I ended up watching both of those two within a week of each other, and then as of 2024, I finished watching the Showa run, which made me rewatch like King Kong Escapes, and I was going to watch the King Kong film from the 70s at the Astor, which is a local cinema in Australia, because the Cinemaniacs, a film group I go to, was presenting it, and I'm like, well, look, I've never seen it, I've had a version on Blu-ray, and then I got the 4K version, and I still haven't watched either version, and they were presenting the 4K version on the big screen. I'm like, I can't go wrong. 4K version of King Kong, like, come on. So I ended up watching that there, but before that, a few days before that, I introduced my partner, who had never seen, I think, any King Kong film, to my knowledge. I introduced her to the original King Kong from 1933, because I've got the Blu-ray release of that. I have the physical version of every single one of these films except for Son of Kong. Not easy to find. And again, there was a lot of back and forth. I watched Kong Skull Island before watching Godzilla X Kong, because me and my brother wanted to rewatch it. And I watched King Kong Escapes again because of the Showa films. And then I watched King Kong Lives because I have the Blu-ray and I wanted to watch it this whole time. And I was waiting until I watched the 76 version before I watched it. And then, as of this past week, I've watched the original, the 2005 King Kong on 4K, the extended cut, and I topped that off the next day by, on the Internet Archive of all places, I found the 1080p version of The Son of Kong, so I watched that as well. So, we're going to talk about these movies. I'm going to talk about them in release order, and then do a ranking of what I think is from worst to best of all of them. There is obviously different iterations as well from, like, what else? I'm going to include the monsterverse films here. I'm not going to include stuff like Mighty Joe Young or anything like that. They have to have King Kong on the name. I know there is The Mother of Son of Kong, which is like a weird, like, 60 minute long film. That's not really a King Kong monster movie. Not official canon, you know? The Kings of Kong. We're talking about the original goddamn movies. Oh my god, there are so many. Okay, I'm not going to go too much into the plot of these ones, but I'll try to I'll just give my thoughts on them, because you've either watched them or you haven't. I'm not going to try to pitch them to you. Anyway, we're going to start with the 1933 King Kong. You should watch this. Oh my god, watch this movie. If you haven't seen any King Kong movie, just watch this one. You don't need to watch literally any other King Kong movie. This is the one you need to watch. It is the original, the classic. It's like the complete opposite to something like Godzilla, where that at least flared up itself with like so many different variations of films. And like, look, I still love the other versions of King Kong. There are so many other, both practical suit person, like guy in a costume, or puppets, or the CGI monsters. I still really like them, but you look at the original, the little stop-motion dude, or his live-action gigantic hands or gigantic face, and it's just the coolest thing you've ever seen. I adore this movie. I gave it 5 stars. Like, I see no wrong with it. It's a pioneer of filmmaking, especially when you look at the documentary that comes with the DVD, or just the Blu-ray release, and the documentary that goes into the making of the film, which was made during the production of the 2005 film, courtesy of Peter Jackson. They went into how they made the original film and what they had to achieve, both in terms of A, stop motion, but B, being able to accompany both live action characters in a frame with a stop motion creature in a multi-layered, like multi-tiered image. The kind of stuff that they pulled off for this film, the technical achievements, it's stunning. But also, my god, is King Kong cool. He's just a little monkey, and he's gigantic, and he's so cool, and he's so cute, and there's like two different versions of him. There are so many elements to it. The black and white really gives him such a dynamic range of visuals. Like, sure, if we're looking at story and whatever, it's pretty basic 30s adventure film. People go to an island, giant monster. Hey, let's just bring the giant monster back to New York and parade him around on Broadway. What a great idea. Maybe not. But in terms of like watching it as an original like kind of narrative, it's not bad. Sure, characters aren't as well developed as a modern movie makes it out to be, especially when Jack turns to Anne and is like, man, I guess I do love you. Only woman I've ever talked to in my entire life. So there's things that are of the time period that are very, very dry, very flat, very two-dimensional. But then King Kong comes along and you're like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. It's such a technical marvel, and it is just amazing filmmaking. Even the final act in New York it's just mental. It's a beautiful picture. It's absolutely stunning. Is that enough that I need to say about it? When I introduced my partner to it, she just thought that Kong looked adorable, but then she was also just like, how the hell did they do this? It's the kind of technical achievements that you're like, how did they make this movie? It looks impossible. And when you look into how they made it, because I showed her snippets from the documentary, you're like, okay, this just looks impossible, the amount of stuff that they had to do. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm a guy who loves stop motion. I love it mixing with animation as well, and with live action. I love the Ray Harryhausen films as well. There is so much of that quality to it. I'm a stickler for black and white cinema. I'm a stickler for kaiju films. I like me a giant monster attacking people. He fights a dinosaur. Like, come on. Like, what else do you need? The original sequence where they're fighting the Triceratops is so amazingly done. Sure, it's still like rear screen projection. There's still elements that are like, oh, it doesn't look as believable in certain scenes and certain sections. Yeah, it's not going to. But at the same time, what they were able to achieve in terms of making everything as beat for beat as they could is just such a quality of effort. And then we look at the 1933 sequel. Yeah, came out like, what, March to December of the same year. We're talking about The Son of Kong, also known as Son of Kong. Or That's My Boy, the prequel, not featuring Adam Sandler. So, Son of Kong is not great, but it's not the worst thing I've seen. It's a film that I did personally give 2 stars, and I wasn't huge on it. But it's a film that where I will commend the fact that they still put in the effort to do stop motion and whatnot, and they still tried. You can tell, as a huge contrast, do not watch these films back to back. Oh my god. I didn't. I watched them months apart, but still, not a good idea, because that would just like, you'd be like, man, I just like watching a piece of shit just with a bug in it, and occasionally pop out. It's just not worth it in contrast to watching the original film. It's not a bad... it's a bad film, okay, it is. It's... My props to the film are the fact that they put in whatever they could for effort in the time that they had for the film, for its stop motion. It is really cheap. It's a film that's 69 minutes long. The first 30 minutes is just Jack. Is it Jack or Carl? It's Carl Denham just escaping New York, just washing up basically on an island with a bunch of other people, and just trying to sell goods, watching a show. The show burns down. They leave. Oh look, the girl from the show is now a stowaway, and then they're getting kicked off because of mutiny. And within the first 35 minutes, they get to Skull Island, which again, I don't know if it's called Skull Island in the original film. I don't recall them ever saying that. I'm pretty sure they only really said that in either the 70s version or just the 2005 version. In the 70s, I don't know if they even called it that in the 70s version. I really should look it up, but I was talking to Dad about it the other day, and I'm like, they just call it Kong's Island in Son of Kong. Like, which you'd be like, well, of course, because King Kong was there. It's like, it's his island. It's like, yeah, but they called it Skull Island because it looks like a goddamn skull. Like, and it's a cool name for a bloody island. Skull Island? Genius. much better than Monster Island from Godzilla. Like, sure, it's still a nice pulpy title, but it's better than Godzilla's Island. But it's like, really, Monster Island? But even that in its own right is a cheap way to just make sure you can get footage of monsters in the movie. The thing with Son of Kong is, again, the second half of the movie, they arrive, the natives are like, go away, you guys ruined our whole entire city, or our whole civilization, we will kill you. And they're like, alright, we'll just sail up the coast. Found a cave, look, there's a gorilla. It must be King Kong's son. Oh, what other thing could it possibly be? We only saw the one gorilla on this whole island. I have to assume it's Kong's son, and I have to have sympathy. I need to feel remorse. Good job, Carl Venom. You're feeling empathy when you literally said to a woman that she should be beaten to a pulp because she stole weight on your boat. Yeah, sometimes the period piece stuff, the whole, well, it's a 30s film. What else would you say to a woman? I don't know, not to beat you to a pulp because you stole weight on my boat? That seems a bit excessive. Yeah, the rest of the movie is just hanging out with Kong. He fights some monsters. Look, there's a secret drill on the island. And then suddenly the whole island just washes away. It is not great. It is easily a cheap cash-in. Sure, it's not a bad watch, realistically, 69 minutes if you have the time to spare, which, again, it's an hour and 10 minutes and it's on the internet for free. Just go watch it. It's not hard. But is it worth your time? And the argument is kind of a very clear, not really. Like, if they had the time, like, even if it was still 69 minutes, which is way too brisk for this kind of a narrative, and you kind of begs the question of, well, it's a direct sequel to the original King Kong. What are they going to do? Carl Denham is guilty, and he runs away, and he just happens to get to Kong's Island and finds a second Kong. Like, it's as basic of a premise as you kind of would expect in its own right. Like, it's not like tons of hours of law and order being held against Carl at all. No, he runs away. He just gets on a boat and flees. And he gets a happy ending and becomes rich. It's not great, and it doesn't expand a lot. Especially if you're looking at if you want something really in-depth of a sequel. Like, if it's the Son of Kong, where's the mother? Like, there's not a lot of lore expansion. It just happens that there's another monkey. And he's a lot goddamn smaller. Like, there's not really much to it. And you can look at that because there's the 76 version and the 86 version, which are, King Kong and King Kong Lives, which is a direct sequel to King Kong, and that's one of those, let's do something different to the original, and it's a hell of a contrast. But before we get to that, we talk about, if I'm not mistaken, the next film is actually King Kong vs. Godzilla. And now, there are two versions of this movie that exist. There is the American version and there is the Japanese version. I've only ever seen the Japanese version both times because the Criterion release has it. Their Showa era release has it on a supplementary disc. I at least argue it's better to watch over the American version because it's, I think, longer as well as just better in general. Most of the times when it's the original Japanese cut, it usually is. So this is where it becomes this is not a sequel to the original King Kong, but more of King Kong's a character we could use. What if King Kong fought Godzilla? Hence why it's called King Kong vs. Godzilla, not Godzilla vs. Kong. Yeah, a bit of a technicality there. This film's not bad. I've enjoyed it both times I've watched it. It has some cheapness to it because this is the first time the first time King Kong is a man in a suit. And that's not exactly the worst thing. I know I'm wearing a Godzilla shirt. I'm very well aware that I do not own a King Kong shirt. I own a bunch of figurines, but I do not own a t-shirt. But it's one of those things when it comes to Godzilla, King Kong vs. Godzilla, is that it's Japanese, so it's got a different take to it. It still has we go to King Kong's island, and it's like a bunch of reporters happened. I think a reporter. No, the stowaway one's Mothra. The reporter, they find the island with King Kong on it, and it's the exact same kind of deal. It's Skull Island. You get the original tribe who lives there, all that kind of stuff. They end up finding Kong, and it's not a complete remake of the original King Kong. It's more of we're just going to kidnap Kong. We're just going to take him with us. We're going to get him to fight Godzilla because Godzilla's been a nuisance. And that's basically what the movie is. They find King Kong, they bring him with them, and then, look, they fight, and they fight just on a dirty paddock mountain, as they would probably refer to it in the movie. And it's cheap, it's cheesy, but it's not as cheap as the Son of Kong. It's cheap in the kind of element of the Toho Godzilla films of the 60s and 70s, where it's Showa era, it's gonna be just two guys in cheap rubber suits that have to keep punching each other. If I'm not mistaken, this is the film where Godzilla jumps on his own tail to, like, slide and kick King Kong, so that's notable. I'm pretty sure that's actually in the poster I used for the movie on my Letterboxd. No, it is not. King Kong looks interesting in the film. It's a weird one. It is also directed by Ishiro Honda, which is notable because he directed the original Godzilla film. He's directed a bunch of Godzilla films. Oh no, it's the one where King Kong picks up Godzilla by his tail and then throws him around. That's a pretty fun image. Yeah, the one I'm thinking of is probably from, like, Verse Megalon or something like that. It's, again, cheesy. But again, for what is 97 minutes, it's not bad. It's a fun fight movie. It's probably the best way to amplify the story that is King Kong, rather than him just being, people in the 30s capture King Kong and bring him back to show him on Hollywood Boulevard. It's like, nah, he fights Godzilla. It's exactly what you'd expect, except it's two people in suits, which I love, personally. I have no criticism against that. And that's what the movie is. But then it has a sequel, because, of course, who wins? Is it King Kong or is it Godzilla? And there was always that rumor of, like, oh, in the American version it's King Kong, but in the Japanese version it's Godzilla. I'm pretty sure there isn't. I'm pretty sure it's just the American version just has an American guy just keeps talking like the original Godzilla King of the Monsters, where it's just some American guy just shows up, starts narrating things or whatever. Neither of them win. I think Godzilla falls, they both fall off a cliff. Godzilla falls in the water, we don't see it show up, but then King Kong gets out of the water, like, pops up and swims away, swimming back to its home, because at least then we can wrap that up. We don't have to bring King Kong back, just in case. But Godzilla, is he dead? Oh no, nah, he's fine. Who cares? He'll be back in the next film, don't worry about it. But the next film for King Kong is the 1967 sequel, so 5 years later, again directed by Ishiro Honda, 104 minutes long, which is notable, is King Kong Escapes. King Kong Escapes was the first one I'd seen of the Japanese films, because I didn't see Godzilla vs. Kong till well after, and I had a Blu-ray release from a long time ago. I would show these as practical props, but I've actually lent them out to friends who have never seen these films before, because I'm a nice friend. I like giving my friends movies to borrow so they can watch it. They did the same to me. Anyway, I've reviewed this film twice. I've given it 2 stars both times. I don't like this. Actually, I gave it 2.5 stars last time, and that was back in 2019. Which, even my review for that was, when your villain's name is Doctor Who, and he is in fact a Japanese man who dresses in a cape, acts like a Bond villain, and makes a robot King Kong, well, you've at least done something right. Yet, in my review from earlier this year, I literally said reminder to my future self, don't watch this film again. You forgot everything that happened in it since you last saw it 5 years ago, and you'll forget it again. But that doesn't mean you need to watch it. Sure, Kong looks goofy as shit. I hate his eyeballs. They're the worst thing in the world. He has these awful eyelids. Terrible costume. Basically permanently stoned, but sucks ass. Instead of ass, but ass. Mechanicong, I like how he's not called Mecha Kong, because again, Mechanicong predates Godzilla, which is insane, by like a decade and a half, by like 15 years. How mental is that? It's a cool design, I will be fair. Mechanicong is a cool looking dude, but 60s robots look cool anyway. Like, again, Mechagodzilla's original costume looks tremendous. Contrast that to Godzilla vs. Kong. It's night and day. So yeah, Mechanicong looks cool, but does fuck all except dig rocks and climb a tower before falling to his death. He's not the greatest villain. The humans, sorry, who? Some girl who keeps saying Kong, Kong in the most annoying way possible, who happens to be a horrible doctor and everyone is sexist towards. Man, that's gotta be fun, isn't it? two guys who are interchangeable despite one speaking fluent gibberish just because. I don't remember what the hell I'm talking about. That's how little I remember this film. A villain named Doctor Who, which is not as fun as he sounds. Again, very Bond villain, very 60s coded, whatever. Even Madam X is just a caricature. Even the only worthwhile part at the end doesn't feature nearly as much miniature destruction as it should have. Just forget about this film again and move on. Yeah. I don't like this film that much. I know it has its fans. Any Showa-era Godzilla film, for me, could be a piece of shit, but for someone else could be a masterpiece. That's what's so crazy about the Showa-era of Godzilla, is that some of the... Like, I like Son of Godzilla. Lots of people hate Son of Godzilla. It was known as the worst Godzilla film for the longest time. And I'm like, I think there are a lot worse films than Son of Godzilla. Like, that's how much I like Son of Godzilla. Who'd have thought? So, yeah. Son of King Kong Escapes is just... I genuinely don't remember most of what happens. I know it starts with Makani Kong that I think aliens have built, again, Doctor Who, and he looks exactly like King Kong, and they just use him to terrorize a place, but then... did they try to kidnap Kong? I do not remember the plot of this movie. Like, that's how little I think I like about it. But it is noteworthy, and someone might have already pointed this out in the comments to kind of ridicule me. It is actually an adaptation of the TV show, the, as I say, the King Kong show, which is a Rankin Bass cartoon. So it's not really... It is kind of a sequel to... I mean, it's technically in canon with King Kong vs. Godzilla, but it is an adaptation of the TV show, hence why it has a more cartoony vibe to it, which I don't like that much. What does it say? King Kong is brought in by the evil Doctor Who to dig element X in a mine when the robot Makani Kong is unable to do the task. This leads to the machine and the real Kong engaging in a tremendous battle atop Tokyo Tower. Oh my god, I remember what happens in this movie. It's literally just, they build Makani Kong because they're like, hey, that King Kong guy, he was pretty cool. What if we, as aliens, build a giant robot version of him to dig a hole? And then because of the radiation, he breaks. So they just kidnap the actual King Kong to dig the hole. And then Makani Kong comes back because they've repaired him. And then they just fight on Tokyo Tower, which again would sound cool. But they both just climb the tower and then they fall. And Makani Kong just blows up because he's made of metal and he's just going to fall and break. It's not a great movie at all. It is wholeheartedly worth skipping, unless you are a really big fan of this Showa-era version and you just want to see it. But yes, both times I've watched it, I have disliked it. So, yeah. But that's okay, because 9 years later, we got King Kong. That one. The 76 version. Which is also really long. 134 minutes. Holy shit. I know I've watched the 3-hour-long version of the 2005 film, but my god, these movies are long. This film I gave 3 stars to. I liked, the new remaster watching the cinema was nice. The fact that my girlfriend watched it with us and she had, obviously a couple of days earlier showed her the original film and she was like, why don't they go to the Empire State Building at the end of the movie? And I'm like, because the thing with the original film was the Empire State Building had just been completed, so they used it as it's the tallest tower, we'll use that, because that's a cool thing. And then when the 76 version came out, well, the Twin Towers had just been completed, so lo and behold, they're pretty goddamn tall, and nobody really is using them because nobody really wants to use them. So we're going to do the King Kong movie on the Twin Towers, so a lot of the top decks that they go in are completely empty. So that's why I had to tell my girlfriend that's why. That's why they used the Twin Towers, because it was more iconic of the day. And because of it, lo and behold, the Twin Towers became really popular. Because, hey, featured in the King Kong movie. Isn't that cool? There's no foreshadowing here. This is a history lesson. So the 76 version is clearly we're making the original one with a guy in a suit mixed with like big practical effects of like a big, big hand, big face kind of stuff. So some stuff they still do in the original, but it's basically the same story. It's different ways of how the characters get to the island, especially like Jessica Lange. They just happened to find her in the water. You know, her boat was destroyed because she didn't want to. She only survived. It's my favorite joke of the film is that she only survived the yacht exploding because she was on deck at the time, whereas everyone else was inside watching Deep Throat, and she didn't want to watch Deep Throat. So when she went outside and the place exploded, she survived and everyone else died, which is hilarious. Nevertheless, probably the only really interesting part of the movie, but it kind of sets up this kind of pseudo-sexual undertones to it. And when I say undertones, I mean when Kong has Jessica Lange in his hand and blows on her, she is really into it. So, I mean, sure, it gave the world Jessica Lange. That's true, and she's a tremendous actress. And Jeff Bridges is in this movie, and he looks awful, so hippie-like. But there are commendable elements. Again, it's talking about environmentalism and stuff. The stuff that they do on the actual island, the Skull Island, is at least different. There's at least a lot of differences in the basic setup, but it still is just people go to an island because they're actually looking for oil, which I do like as a different thing. It's not a mysterious island with a giant monkey. We're looking for oil. Apparently this island has it. And it kind of does, but it's too premature. But hey, look, there's this giant fucking monkey. What if we just bring him back and we'll get money out of that? So, you know, capitalism for the win. And it does have iconic moments like when they unveil Kong to this whole parade of people, and he's just in a giant cage and he has a crown on his head. And it's just like, get it? King Kong. It's literal, I guess. It's a good image. And then he just breaks out because it's this stupid, like, again, it's a great running gag that whenever, except for in the monsterverse films, they don't do it in the monsterverse films, which I'm like, man, they really should have, where King Kong is tied up in chains, and they're the strongest chains imaginable, and he breaks out of them with ease. And I love that in every version he does that, except for the MonsterVerse films, where he's in chains on a boat and he still just can't break out of them when Godzilla's gonna kill him. It's hilarious. They really could have done that. I feel like they would have been a great running gag that no one but me would have picked up on. People would have picked up on it, maybe. But, like, that's just an amusing thing, at least in my mind. He runs around New York, he climbs the Twin Towers, fights some helicopters, and then dies. It's the same gist you see every time. It's the same premise, same plot, just with different aspects to make it more modern. And at least you do have the modern stuff, but again, the effects are less interesting because of it. At least with, like, the Showa era ones, like the Japanese films, you have the element of, in the pretext of them being the Japanese Godzilla films, the lazy or just cheaper kind of effects kind of works because it's kind of the style and vibe of those films. Like, you don't expect watching original Godzilla films to be like, this is going to be the best effects you've ever seen. It's like, nah, man, it's just two guys in suits running around in a dirt paddock jumping at each other. Like, it's not the most amazing stuff, but it's enjoyable, you know? It's just fun. But then you contrast that to the 76 version, it's like, man, there's a lot of bad, like, blue screen and green screen stuff, and, like, probably blue screen realistically, but, like, the reprojections doesn't work as well. There's a lot of effects that have Kong on screen that do not work as well as either the Showa era ones or even the original film, especially the original film. And when the original film is such a marvel of special effects, you look at the 70s one and you're like, man, it just doesn't work so well, and it feels cheap, but then it also is a Dino De Laurentiis film, so it kind of already earns that badge just by having his name attached to the goddamn picture. So yeah, the 76 King Kong is an interesting effort for its own right. It definitely has its fans, it definitely has its preferences in terms of, like, who likes to watch it. I have both cuts now as well. I have the TV edition, which is longer, which I might endeavour to watch eventually, but so far I'm content with the theatrical cut, and even then, I wasn't huge on it. I only gave it 3 stars. I was like, it's alright. Like, once you've seen the better versions, or even just other versions, whether you think this one's better or not, yeah, it's just night and day when you look at this compared to the original version, or even arguably the Godzilla vs. Kong, or eventually what came after. And so, of course, the next thing that came out was 10 years later with the same production team, same director. You have King Kong Lives. different cast. It does open with what happened at the end of the previous film, but the rest of it is brand new footage, and it's interesting to say the least. It's a film that I didn't have like high expectations going into because I'd heard so many bad things about it. I'd heard it was like a bad film, it was a bad sequel. There's a lot of like I would say controversy, but like you compare it to like Son of Kong, and it's like, I mean, I hadn't seen Son of Kong until after watching this film, King Kong Lives. But watching King Kong Lives by itself, I'm like, I actually like it more than the 76 version. I didn't rank it higher, I mean rate it higher. I gave it 3 stars still, but I enjoyed it, and it does things very differently. Where you look at, say, Son of Kong as example. Son of Kong is just Denim wants kind of retribution, ends up back on the island, and meets Kong's son, I guess. And lo and behold, still dies. You idiot, Jack. Why? Carl, who gives a shit about people's names anymore? But you look at the 80s version, 86, and it has things that I really like, but it also is a bit dull with its story. Like, it's a film that takes place 10 years later and is like, oh, we've got an artificial heart for Kong. He technically didn't die at the end of the previous one. Let's not really look too deep into it. But it's not like he was blown up or anything. He fell off a building. You know, he has internal bleeding, whatever. They replace his heart with an artificial one, but they need the right blood type. Lo and behold, on the exact same island where he was, there's a female Kong. And that is hilarious. But also, it's like, sure. I mean, that kind of makes sense when you'd expect that, like, well, if there's a male, there would eventually be a female, because how else would the male exist, potentially? Not saying it's his mother, but obviously a suitor. They don't get too in-depth into how one can exist or the other, whatever. It's more of just there was a female here the whole time. It is a big island, you know. So, yeah, sure, it has that kind of sequel thing of, oh, what if there's 2 of them? Hey, King Kong, he's gonna get laid. Yeah, because once he's healed, he's like, wakes up because he can just sense her. He can smell her pheromones because she's so close by. And lo and behold, he escapes from the facility to court her. They run off together and go and play around until the military catches up with them, and then splits them up, and then captures her, kills him, kind of just wounds him quite a bit, and then he eventually comes back, saves her. It turns out she's been preggo, and he has a son of Kong. But then Kong does, unfortunately, he gets real hurt in this movie. I'm not going to say whether he dies or not, but that's like the gist of the movie. The movie is basically just the 2 apes get together, run away from the military, and then she gets kidnapped and he has to save her. And it's not bad for what it is. Like, it's more focused on, like, practical, like, effects. There's a lot of military fighting. There's a lot of action scenes. That's what I'm looking for. That's the word. Action scenes. Like, there's a lot more to it than how slow-paced the original one is, where it's like, the humans, we're following the humans, they gotta get to the island. There's a whole section in the 76 version where they're coming back, and they're on the boat, and I'm like thinking, wow, we never saw this in the original, but instead of it being a huge, like, this is how they did it, it's like, he's just in a big cage in a boat, which seems impossible for the size, and then Jessica Lange just has to just jump in the hole and be like, it's okay, Kong, don't get upset, you're safe with me. And it's like, okay, sure, I guess. None of those characters return in this one, because Kong doesn't need Jessica Lange anymore. He has a real monkey that he can, well, an actual monkey, not a real monkey, an actual goddamn monkey that he can court, per se. And the human characters are fine. You do get Linda Hamilton, she's okay in it. Like, there's no real standouts. Like, at least the previous film had some decent actors to it, doing a decent job. This one is so-so. So there are lower elements because the human stuff is kind of meh, but it like is also a contrast of like these 2 scientists kind of getting together whilst Kong and his lady friend are getting together and whatever. It's not the best film out there. It's not the worst Kong film, that's for sure. Like, again, I prefer it to the 76 King Kong because at least it's quicker in its movement. It does things quicker, and Kong's on screen for a lot longer in contrast to the 76 version. You don't get the weird green screen, blue screen like effects. There's all the effects work pretty well. It's like they've taken the 10 years and they're like, okay, let's actually do this a bit better and make it look better. There's a lot of great miniature effects, a lot of great, like, again, Kong going around destroying shit. Like, a lot of that stuff is really fun, and that's really fun, like, reflection on like the Showa era stuff and whatever, stuff that they didn't really get to do in the 76 version because it was like jungle, city. This time it's just like America. It's the American terrain, you know? They're just in the wilderness and rednecks are trying to hunt Kong. Like, there's so much crazy stuff like that I'm like, this feels appropriate. What if a giant monkey, just two of them in fact, were just running around the place? Call the rednecks. They'll go kill them, probably. So there's elements like that. It does take a bit of time to get going, but once it does, it's pretty fun, and I enjoyed the ride, and it's a pretty decent movie. Like, it's no masterpiece again. It's not the best King Kong film, but it's pretty entertaining, and I liked it. I definitely preferred it, again, to the original. Even though it is very poorly reviewed in contrast. It's kind of shocking how poorly reviewed it is in contrast. But at the same time, I don't think they're both held to such high standards. But after King Kong Lives, which kind of buried the franchise for quite a bit, we jump to, of course, the 2005 Peter Jackson film, which is the big Look the Monkey CGI, it's mocap, and it's a remake of the original film, which pays nice homages to the original whilst expanding upon it as well, doing stuff that the original couldn't achieve because of its limited time and resources at certain sections like the bug pit and whatnot, but also, hey, they can do a lot of this stuff in a computer, it can look a certain way. You can expand upon the characters more, give them more depth, whether the actors' choices was a good idea, maybe not. Like, I'm not huge on the fact that Jack Black is in the film, nor that other guy who plays the Jack, the goddamn writer. Like, they're okay. They're fine for what they are. Like, Naomi Watts is really good. I really love her in the role. And I do like Andy Serkis as Kong, you know. There are some fun other actors as well. There's a guy from Billy Elliot who I've always liked his character. I like his relationship with Ace. The extended cut does add some extra scenes as well. Not too many character ones, but notably at least they see a Triceratops in it, which is a homage to the original film, and it's the first monster that they find, as well as they expand upon basically just more monster parts. They just expand upon it. Look, there's a fish in the water. There's so many extra sequences that I like that they've kind of added in, and it just is nicer to see in a way. It makes the pacing a little bit more, you know, trudges a bit along, but it is a 3-hour-long film. It's already a long goddamn movie. If you want to sit through all of that, sure, maybe why not sit through the extra bit? I do like some of the extra character parts, and maybe I might be getting it confused because it's been a couple of years since I've seen the theatrical cut, which is the only version I've seen, but I watched the theatrical cut a lot growing up. Like, I saw this film in cinemas when I was a kid, I watched it a lot on DVD, and I jumped straight from DVD to 4K, and then I actually had to go back to the Blu-ray because the 4K originally didn't work properly, and then when I watched it this time around, I did watch it on 4K, and it worked fine, and it was the extended cut. So I definitely noticed some differences with some of the scenes, but this is really one that you contrast with the original. You see it as, not as a, oh, this is the benefits of CGI, or this is that and that. It's very much a film that pays respect to the original, and that's why I like it so much as well. We're going to do the original story, we're going to add to it. It's like Cinderella and its live-action remake. It's taking something that had limitations because of maybe character elements or even budgetary stuff for, like, what they could and couldn't achieve through the time that they had with the technology that they had at the time, and then just up that. Both A, because we have computer effects and stuff, but also because, you know, Cinderella, live action, whatever. But even then, Kong is CGI now. He's not a puppet or a stop-motion creature, you know, but they still have respects to those original things. You can add more character through performances, like with the mocap stuff with Andy Serkis. So, though Kong still has personality and you do care about him in the original version, you do so as much so in the 2005 version because he can emote more, because it's a human providing the performance. So there are elements like that that I give huge props to the film. I gave the film 4 stars as an overall, and again, I still prefer the original version, the 33 version, in contrast. But it's definitely that kind of thing where I can see why the film has criticism against it, because again, it's long. There's not a huge amount of interesting stuff with the human characters, and the human characters are definitely the weakest part. But I guess with any kaiju film, the humans are usually the weakest part. Unless there's a minimal amount and they're really well developed, or it's a lot of human stuff, minimal monster stuff. Take Godzilla -1, for example, where it's maximum human drama, minimum Godzilla impact, but its usage of both is still really fun. But at least King Kong, the 2005 version, I like its use of monsters, I like its use of effects. There's no part of the film that for me looks bad except for the opening sequences with New York. I don't like the look of it that much. It looks a bit weird because it's on green screen, but also got this color grading that's meant to make it look like it's the old 30s kind of movies and stuff. That kind of, what is it? That kind of brownie gradient thing. I've already forgotten what the hell it's called. Not black and white, but that thingy. Sometimes words just don't come to my head when I need them. That thing still kind of permeates, where it's they could have maybe changed the characters a bit more, made them a bit more compelling to watch, but there's also a lot more characters in the film, and because of that, there's a lot more people to try to get invested in when they do eventually probably die. And there's a lot of death in this movie. My god, the stuff that they show is gratuitous at times, and I really love it. I love the bug pit stuff. I love how creepy some of the creatures are. You get dinosaurs again. They've updated. It's look, now we've got CGI dinosaurs, and guess what? There's 3 of them. There is the benefit of the fact there's a seamless nature to the humans interacting with the CGI creatures. I like the stuff even when she puts her hand on Kong. It's probably actually a real thing that she's touching. It's not a big block of green. This ain't the prequels. This ain't Star Wars prequel films. This is 2005. The guy who did Lord of the Rings. There's elements to it where it's there's clearly thought and process put into this. There is we're not making this because we can. We're making this because we love the original property and we want to pay respect to it, as well as bringing the story to a modern audience. Hence why it's still set in the 30s. It's not set in modern day, which I like that they did that. But yeah, as an overall, if you aren't wanting to watch the original with its black and white, the stop motion, this isn't the worst contrast. This is the best, the next best thing, and I appreciate that element to it. There are some dated elements to it, sure, with its, again, CGI, but for the most part, I enjoy it. I like the characters. I wish there was a bit more to them. I like more of the side characters than I do the main characters, but it is what it is in the end. And it's quite a well-shot film, so, there is a lot of elements to it that I really appreciate. And of course, we did get that whole production diary thing, which emphasized the whole, how did they make the original film? And it's such a well-done documentary that it's it towers, head over toes, towers above the 2005 film by miles. But it's still nice to have both, So I really appreciate that element to it. The next film in this list is surprisingly Kong Skull Island. It's kind of crazy how it was 12 years before they made another King Kong film, but I mean, I guess what else are you going to do? You can't exactly make a sequel to King Kong unless you want to remake Son of Kong, but try to do it a little bit better. And I kind of like that they didn't. This is just fresh take. When I originally watched this movie, I hated it because I'm this is nothing like King Kong from 2005. I was expecting a remake of that, but this is a modern day edition with the whole, it's set in the 70s during the end of the Vietnam War, and it's a war film. It's a nihilistic war film, and it's mixing King Kong with Apocalypse Now, and I didn't get that when I first watched it. But then I did watch stuff like Apocalypse Now, and I did understand its style, and I even watched video essays and stuff talking about it, and I understood that it was a different approach, because sometimes me, stupid, obviously, I rewatched it again earlier this year. I don't love it as much as I used to. I used to really like its style. I used to like its use of action. Again, the nihilistic stuff was a real big thing for me. I like the color grading, that kind of stuff. I still like its looks and how it's designed. I like the John C. Reilly character. Some of the other characters aren't too bad, but they're also like, think about big context of the universe of Godzilla, and you're like, wait, so where are these characters now? And there's like comic book adaptations or like continuations that show what happens to the characters in modern day and stuff, which is interesting. But you know, for the most part, I like what it is for what it is. It's not a bad film. I had given it 4 stars originally. I gave it more 3.5 stars this time because it's like I don't love it as much as I used to. Maybe it's just I'm not in the nihilistic mindset, you know, to appreciate that kind of stuff. But also rewatching it this year, I'm like, and this is even on a 4K disc. I'm like, yeah, I don't see this as a film I'm going to return to a lot. I think this is like the 3rd time I've watched it, and again, I know the first time I watched it I hated it, the second time I really, really liked it, and this time around I was just kind of like, yeah, it's alright, you know? I think, yeah, because I'd reviewed it twice. The second time I watched it, or the first time I logged it on Letterboxd, was back in 2019, so I even said the greatest nihilistic monster movie ever, which is not true. But yes, the sound, the characters, the lighting / color palette, the music, and especially the cinematography, I love it. See, it's just those elements that I really like. This time it was just Big Monkey Go Brr. You know, again, I was happy, content with the 3.5 star rating. It's fun. I enjoy it. I prefer it to a lot of the Godzilla films. I prefer it to a lot of the King Kong films, especially the 70s ones, especially the other Show era ones. So there are those elements that I really appreciate about the film. You know, I like Big, you know, Monkey. I like the fight scenes that it has with some of the creatures. I like how they expand on Skull Island to show more variations of creatures, and I really appreciate that element of it too. Being a big monster fan, you know, I love me some kaiju. It's really fun to watch it for those elements. And again, you know, Vietnam movie kind of deal. So it definitely has that, pulls every trick out of its sleeve, and you're kind of like, yeah, I kind of expected that, but it's also just fun to watch. You know, for what is essentially a movie where characters going from A to Z, and in the meantime, big monkey, big dinosaur, big other thing, a big octopus, another big dinosaur. Look, big monkey's back again. Oh, lo and behold. And again, John C. Reilly is fantastic. I love his whole character in the movie. So, you know, that's good stuff there. And I think then the next one is just the rest of the monsterverse, isn't it? Because, of course, its direct sequel is Godzilla vs. Kong, and then you get GODZILLAxKONG. And both of these films I gave 4 stars as well. Godzilla vs. Kong I really, really love. For me, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was Godzilla and Kong, and they fight. The human characters, anytime Millie Bobby Brown's on screen, skip it. I like the Rebecca Hall stuff, I like the Skarsgård, like, I like some of the other characters, but like, I just don't need the other characters doing the other bullshit. I like the characters who interact with Kong. I like the little girl, the little deaf girl, she's great. I love the way it's shot, the way it looks. It's not as stylized as Kong Skull Island was, but I wasn't expecting it to be, because it was a combination of, like, it's Godzilla and Kong. They have to merge, they have to fight. And I just love it. It sets it up with the 3 different fights of one wins, then the other wins, then they both, well, obviously there's another different victor. Yeah, obviously this film still has Godzilla in it, which is fun. I like Godzilla. I like the monsterverse. And, of course, Mechagodzilla. And I like the contrast of, like, oh, there's also this underworld. Like, there's a lot of... We've got Kong from the first film. We're going to expand upon him and, like, his lore as well. Like, hint towards further things of his own civilization. He has an axe that glows in the dark. Like, there's a lot of just fun, goofy shit, and I just love that kind of stuff. Like, it's like, I don't need this big poetic movie about beauty, kill the beast, and all that. What is it called? Intertextuality? I don't need that kind of bullshit. I just want to see Big Monkey and Big Lizard, and they fight. And they do. 3 times. It's, like, wonderful. What a great movie. I wish it was shorter, because I don't like Millie Bobby Brown. I wish she wasn't in the movie. She sucks. Get her out of the goddamn film. And yeah, again, the Mechagodzilla stuff is a nice, final conflict between the two as well. So it's like, it's cool, you know. I like the dynamic, showing that they're in different locations, you know, with the boats in the water, and then, I can't remember where the middle fight was, but I know the final fight, of course, is in, fucking, what's it called, Hong Kong, and, you know, interesting scene, like, in them in a city, just decimating it. There's just fun stuff like that. Again, it's not the most poetic film, but I just like it as big action blockbuster CGI fest. It's my jam. Big monkey goes brr. And of course you get Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, which is more of a Kong film, pretty clearly when it's like his story, and I like that. I like how we relate to him as a character. He has his sawtooth. There's all these stuff that is like, this is clearly a King Kong sequel, but Godzilla just happens to show up. I mean, obviously, you look at the behind the scenes, you realize, yeah, Godzilla was really not meant to be in this film. That's why he's not really there much, and when he is, he's fighting other monsters on his way to potentially meet up and fight Kong, or fight with Kong. And then, of course, he fights with Kong to fight other monkeys. There's really not much to get into plot-wise. It's just fun. They don't have Millie Bobby Brown. That's a step up in my book. He fights monkeys with other monkeys. He literally just picks up a tiny monkey and uses it as a bloody baton, and it's like, this is cinema. I love it. That's the kind of thing where you get a Godzilla fan to look at Godzilla -1 and be like, this masterpiece, beautiful, love it. Then Godzilla X Kong, this dumb as shit, love it, masterpiece, 10 out of 10. I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but I really, really enjoyed it. And it's the thing, it's also nice just to see these two characters just hang out on screen, fight other monsters together. It's really fun to kind of just see that that's kind of where we've taken these characters, that it's not just something that's humans capturing giant monkey, bringing it back to the mainland, oh look, he's on Broadway. It's like, nah, this guy's just fucking people up. He's just there to beat people up, and that's what's fun about it. We care about him, he has an emotional arc. I love it. It's just good stuff, you know? So, it's interesting to see how, as an overall, how King Kong has evolved from this giant monkey, this big, just taken over for 100 years, almost. And, yeah, I love the contrast between all of the films, how they're kind of still trying different things. You got the original film, you got the Showa era films, you got the remakes in the 70s and 80s. You got the 2005 film, which is remake and homage, where the 70s film obviously is remake, plus they're trying to do something else because it's contextualize it for a modern time, whatever. And then you get the monsterverse stuff, where it's just, they're in a universe of other big monsters, so he can fight big monsters. My ranking from bottom to top, we have at number 10, The Son of Kong, with 2 stars. My least favourite, I don't plan to ever revisit it. Is not a worthwhile effort of a film, despite its use of stop motion. Even the stop motion looks really lazy and, not lazy, but, rushed a lot of the time. And that's my biggest criticism of it, outside of it being a pretty meh story, you know? Then we've got King Kong Escapes, which I don't really think I'll ever watch again. I obviously didn't like it both times I've watched it, and it's dumb, but I do like Makani Kong, but he's useless in the movie. He's only there for 10 minutes. And it's a long movie. It's almost 2 hours long. It's just like, oh my god. I know I'm saying that when I'm looking at the 2005 film and all the rest of them, which are also really long films, but it's like, yeah, but they have stuff happen in them. This film doesn't. Then I've got, at number 8, King Kong from 1976, which, again, I don't mind it as a film. It's not one I'm going to revisit a lot if I want to watch a King Kong film. There's so many better ones out there to watch. It's a nice enough effort for its time period and for what it tried to do. Again, it feels like a Dino De Laurentiis film, so there's ups and downs. A lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it. It's kind of an in-between, and I think it's just kind of fine. It's alright. I had friends who loved it because they'd never seen an independent King Kong film. They only ever seen him in a fight in the MonsterVerse film. So that is unique. Okay, you like it because you've never seen King Kong have a solo feature. It's not a bad solo feature, but I've seen his other solo features, and I know that he's much better in his other solo features. Then you've got King Kong Lives, which I just prefer to the 76 King Kong. I like the effects more. I like the fights more. The all the miniature work. There's a lot of great stuff that I really like in it, but it's also still kind of pretty dull. The human characters aren't great. There's some ins and outs as to what's good and what's bad comparing the two, and I think it is shorter. Like, it's 105 minutes compared to 134, so it kind of gets the job done much quicker and much more entertaining in its own right. Then at number 6 we have King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962. This at least has the Showa era element, the Japanese touch, the Ichiro Honda. There's a lot of great elements to that. For a lot of people, I can see this being like really cheesy, but also some people being like, this is actually really fun, because if you know the Showa era Godzilla, you know the original stuff. It's just really fun to watch. The first time Godzilla's in a suit, he doesn't look too bad, especially in contrast to King Kong Escapes. Holy shit! But yeah, I don't know. And he fights Godzilla. Like, there's some real wins there. Like, some real fun stuff. He's just a big monkey who throws rocks, but you know, against a radioactive lizard, which seems like a ridiculous pairing. But that's also just the fun of it. It's ridiculous, and that's what's so fun about it. Then you've got Kong Skull Island, which I gave 3.5 stars. Again, it's the Vietnam War film effort. It is much better stylistically, with some nice colour to it. I don't mind all the characters. You do have some really fun side characters, like, again, John C. Reilly. But as an overall, it is just the big CGI effort of just big monkey fights people who are trying to not have PTSD. So, yeah. It's got a great cast to it, like a hell of a range to its cast. So, you know, and again, I like the visuals, I like the direction, the stylization of it. It's not bad. It's a pretty fun take on King Kong, and very different to basically any other King Kong venture. Then you have King Kong from 2005, which, again, it's long. I do still like it quite a lot. I like its mood, its atmosphere. I like the characters to a degree, but I really like the monster stuff. I like how it's shot. I like how it's all depicted. It has much more just kind of a big prowess to it, in contrast to, like, Kong Skull Island, where Kong Skull Island is much more fun, goofy stuff. This is like honoring a legend kind of deal. It's got some fun stuff to it. It's got some nice acting. Feels very old Hollywood in its own right, even though it's literally done by a New Zealand director. So, obviously no criticism towards him. I mean, we got the Lord of the Rings trilogy out of him, but yeah, it's just like someone can just pick up that style and be like, this is what we have. This is a homage. This is paying respect. This is what we love. So, yeah. And then there's GODZILLAxKONG: The New Empire, which I don't know if I prefer it to Godzilla vs. Kong, but I really enjoy it. I like the Kong stuff. I like how much of it is just silent movie with King Kong. It's fun. It's colourful. It's just big blockbuster stuff. I enjoy it. Can't go wrong. I had a blast watching it. You know, I haven't watched it a second time yet, so I don't, haven't like solidified my position on if I think it's the best monsterverse film yet, or even the best King Kong film. Definitely not the best King Kong film, but yeah, I don't know. It's just really fun. And then, of course, next up is Godzilla vs. Kong, which I prefer most because I've watched it more times. Sure, the Millie Bobby Brown stuff is still there, but I still like the Mechagodzilla stuff, and I like how it's just they meet, they fight, they meet, they fight. It's just so many fights between the two guys, but not too many fights, but just enough. It's like, yeah. I wish it was just a bit shorter without Millie Bobby Brown. It would have been great. Whether she's a good enough actress or not, who really cares? I just don't like her story. I just don't care about it. Yeah, go away. So, yeah. that's its own thing. But I really enjoy the film. It's just ear-to-ear smiling kind of movie. I just really enjoy it. And then, of course, the creme de la creme, the 5-star masterpiece, of course, is the original King Kong, which I do find to be the best King Kong film. It's one of those, you can't go wrong with the original. It does so much in terms of a technical craft, but it's an entertaining film. Sure, the characters are a bit, one note because it's the time period, but I really love it. I love this film so much. It has such a staple in what cinema is and what monster movies are because of it. So, yeah, it's got such a cinematic prowess behind it, as well as it is just a really solid goddamn movie. So, yeah, and without it, we might not have gotten where we are now with, effects. Like, we probably still would have eventually, but there's just so much language to it and so much detail and such an artistic craft behind it that it's like, this is like perfection. I love it. So yeah. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. What are your favourite King Kong films of the 10 that have been released? And yeah, do you like that they're going more cartoony approach with the monsterverse stuff, or do you prefer Kong being a kind of brooding hero or villain type? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.